If you made it this far into the story, you're officially part of our journey, and we're so glad you're here. I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments so we can see how far this story has traveled. And if you haven't already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Tomorrow's story is one you won't want to miss, full of heart, transformation, and a twist that might just leave you speechless. Same time, same place. See you there. I was never the daughter who followed the script, and in my family there was a script. Born into a proud Indian-American household just outside San Francisco, I was raised with a clear roadmap. Ace your SATs, get into Stanford or at least UCLA, study medicine or law, marry by 25, and settle down within a 20-mile radius of your parents, preferably in a nice suburban home where they could drop by unannounced and judge your spice rack organization. I tried. I really did. But somewhere along the way, the path that was carved out for me started to feel like a cage. At 19, while pre-med students were memorizing anatomy terms, I was sketching logos and mapping out user experiences. By 21, I'd made my first mistake. I switched majors to design. Not architecture, not engineering, just design. My parents called it my phase. My advisors called it a risk. I called it the first time I could breathe. The second strike? I turned down a graduate scholarship and moved to Berlin after landing a job with a global branding firm. It wasn't glamorous, just a one-bedroom flat above a noisy cafe and client calls at 2 a.m., but it was mine. My father said freelancing was just another word for unemployed. My mom told relatives I was still figuring things out, but what they didn't know was that while they were doubting me, I was building something, quietly, boldly, on my own terms. Then came the third and final blow. Ethan, a man with no Indian last name, no family ties they could research, and no LinkedIn profile they could obsessively stalk. When I told them I was engaged, their first reaction wasn't joy. It was suspicion. My mother actually asked me if he was real, not in a teasing way either. She truly believed I'd fabricated him to deflect pressure. I was 31, still unmarried, working in branding, and living abroad. In their eyes, I was the black sheep who strayed too far. I had always known I didn't fit the mold, but until that moment, I didn't realize just how much of my life they had quietly erased in their minds, rewriting me as a lost cause. They didn't ask how I felt. They didn't ask what made me happy. They only asked why I hadn't settled down yet, why I couldn't just do the things normal girls did. But I wasn't a normal girl. I was Layla, a woman who built her career from scratch in a foreign city, a woman who fell in love with someone who saw her not as a rebellion, but as a force. I didn't need their permission to be myself, but sometimes I still wished I had their support. That longing, that gap between who I was and what they saw is what followed me into every family gathering, every phone call, every subtle comment wrapped in fake concern. And it's what made what happened next all the more powerful. So when the invitation arrived, an ornate, gold-embossed envelope with a 3-day itinerary for my cousin Ria's engagement party, I knew exactly what it meant. Not celebration, not family unity, but scrutiny. It was set to take place in San Jose, in a sprawling 10,000-square-foot banquet hall, complete with catered buffets, henna stations, choreographed dances, and even a sitar performance over brunch. The kind of event where everyone dresses like royalty and talks like they're hosting a gossip column. I hadn't been to a family function in years, and honestly, I'd never missed them. But this one was unavoidable, especially because the invitation came with a handwritten note from my mother. Hope your fiancé can make it this time. That smiley face? It wasn't cute. It was condescending. A passive-aggressive jab wrapped in calligraphy and glitter. I won't lie. I considered skipping it, but Ethan had already agreed to fly in from Doha, and we were planning to spend the holidays in California. Anyway, it was the perfect chance to see friends, reconnect with old mentors, and maybe, just maybe, prove a few people wrong. The day of the engagement arrived like a storm, chaotic, loud, full of polished appearances and backhanded compliments. I stepped into the venue alone, wearing a deep emerald sari with gold threadwork, my hair swept up, jewelry understated but sharp. I felt composed on the outside, but inside, I was bracing for the familiar questions. Still living in Berlin? Do you miss having a stable job? Is your fiancé still in, Dubai? Or is it Qatar now? And of course, have you thought about freezing your eggs? Every comment was dipped in fake concern and delivered with a smile that never quite reached the eyes. I had learned long ago to smile back, nod politely, and tuck the hurt somewhere deep. But then, as I made my way toward the bar, I heard my mother's voice. She was standing in a circle of aunties, Ria's mom included, laughing. She says he's in aviation, she said with a dramatic roll of her eyes. I told Arvind, maybe he's imaginary. She never shows photos. Never brings him around. It's been over a year. They laughed. Not soft chuckles, loud, open-mouthed, look at this crazy girl laughter. I stood there frozen, a glass of sparkling water in hand, heart pounding. I could have walked away. I should have walked away, but I didn't. I stayed. I listened. I let the sting sink in because deep down I knew what was coming. I knew what they didn't. Ethan was on his way. And when he arrived, everything was about to change. Because the girl they thought was all talk, she was about to deliver the plot twist no one in that banquet hall would ever forget. I stood at the edge of the ballroom, still clutching my drink when the MC announced it was time for the toasts. One by one, people stepped forward. Ria's best friend, her fiancé's college roommate, even my older brother Jay, who hadn't texted me in months, grabbed the mic to say something heartfelt about love and destiny. And then, the MC called my name. There was a pause, just long enough to make me consider declining, but I didn't. I walked to the center of the room, past rows of eyes that had long stopped seeing me clearly. My sari shimmered under the chandelier, but inside I was shaking. I hadn't planned anything. No speech. No clever lines. Just truth. I'll keep it short, I said, my voice steady but quiet. It's beautiful to watch two people be celebrated, supported, and believed in. Not everyone gets that, but if you do, hold on to it. The applause was light, polite, and then, as if summoned by fate itself, I heard it. A distant thrum, faint at first, then louder, mechanical, rhythmic, the unmistakable sound of helicopter rotors. Heads turned, murmurs spread like wildfire. People began drifting toward the windows, confused, curious. The wedding planner rushed outside. And then, the doors opened. There he was. Ethan stepped into the hall like something out of a movie. Navy blue suit, no tie, watch catching the chandelier light, hair slightly tousled from the rotor wind. He looked impossibly calm, like he'd done this 100 times. Like this, walking into a room full of judgment, meant nothing to him. But I knew the truth. He came for me. Sorry I'm late, he said, that signature smirk on his face. Had to park the helicopter. Someone actually gasped. He walked straight over to me, gently kissed my forehead, and whispered, "Did I miss your toast?" "No," I said, smiling. "You're right on time." In that moment, everything shifted. The energy, the temperature, the power. The same aunties who had laughed at my expense just 20 minutes earlier now blinked in stunned silence. The whispers changed tone, from mockery to curiosity. They were watching him, yes, but they were really watching me. For the first time, not with pity or suspicion, but with awe. He greeted everyone around us. My mom, who suddenly forgot how to form complete sentences. My dad, who tried to hide his surprise behind a businessman's nod. Ethan was smooth, respectful, confident. When someone asked what he did, he answered simply, "Aviation logistics, mostly in the Gulf and Europe." Then he smiled and added, "Still fly sometimes, keeps me grounded." They laughed, not because it was funny, but because they were recalibrating. I wasn't the black sheep anymore. I was the woman with the man who landed a helicopter at an engagement party. The one they couldn't ignore. And deep down, they all knew. This wasn't just an entrance. It was a statement. After Ethan walked in, everything felt different. Not just the room, but the weight I'd been carrying for years. I watched as he shook hands with relatives who'd once laughed at the idea of him, who now couldn't stop smiling or asking questions about aviation and international business. Suddenly, the same uncles who'd warned me about wasting my prime years were fascinated by his career. The same aunties who whispered about egg freezing and stability were asking about our travel plans and how we met. But it wasn't the attention that struck me. It was the shift, the quiet recalibration happening behind people's eyes, the subtle, unspoken apology wrapped in curiosity. My mother, who had once referred to Ethan as probably fictional, was now nervously adjusting the edge of her dupatta, trying to find something, anything, to say that didn't sound ridiculous. My father kept his usual composure, but I saw it. In the set of his jaw, in the way his eyes tracked Ethan across the room, trying to fit him into a framework that had never made space for someone like him, or someone like me. That night, nothing explosive happened. There was no dramatic confrontation, no shouting, no grand gestures of acceptance. But the air had changed. You could feel it in the pauses, in the extra seconds it took for someone to respond, in the awkward glances people exchanged when they realized they'd been wrong. Later that evening, after dinner and dancing, my mom pulled me aside near the grand staircase. She looked uncomfortable, like her blouse was too tight or the words were too heavy. "Why didn't you tell us he was coming?" she asked. I shrugged, not out of spite, but out of exhaustion. Would it have changed anything? She hesitated, looked down at her hands. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, "I didn't realize he was this serious." And there it was. The thing I'd waited years to hear. Not an apology. Not even full acceptance. But a crack in the wall. A recognition, however slight, that maybe, just maybe, they had misjudged me. That I hadn't failed. I'd just taken a different path. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of polite smiles and lingering glances, but I knew something had begun. A shift, not loud or dramatic, but tectonic. The foundation was shaking, not crumbling, just realigning. Ethan found me later on the rooftop garden, where the music was quieter and the stars barely peeked through the Bay Area haze. He slipped his arms around me and rested his chin on my shoulder. "How'd it go?" he asked softly. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Better than I expected," I said. "Worse than it should have had to be." He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. That's why he was here, not to impress them, but to remind me I never needed their permission to be extraordinary. We flew back to Dubai a few days later. The California sky had been kind, but the air there still carried a weight I could only feel once it lifted, once I was home again. Back in the dry warmth of the Gulf, in the glow of city lights that never slept, I breathed differently, freer, lighter. But even in that freedom, something lingered. Not bitterness, not anger, just the ache of unfinished business. My parents had begun to shift. Slowly. Quietly. But they still didn't see the full picture. Not really. They saw Ethan's charm, the helicopter entrance, the wealth. But they hadn't seen me. What I had built. What it cost. For years, they dismissed my work as temporary, my path as uncertain. They believed I was drifting, lost in some creative daydream. They didn't realize I was building an empire, one client, one brand, one sleepless night at a time. And I didn't just want them to accept it, I wanted them to witness it. A few months. Later, the opportunity arrived. Ethan and I were both invited to speak at a high-profile summit in Dubai. He on aviation trends across emerging markets, and me to give a keynote on brand scaling without venture capital. My consultancy had just crossed 7 figures, and a luxury conglomerate had signed on as a client. I was no longer freelancing. I was leading. I said yes, but only on one condition. I wanted to bring guests. The organizers agreed. So I sent 2 invitations, one for my mother, one for my father, along with a handwritten note that said, "You once asked if I was serious about my life. I'd like to show you what serious looks like." 3 days passed before I got a response. Just a simple text from my mom. "We'll be there." When they landed, Ethan picked them up. Not in a helicopter, just our Tesla. We'd done the dramatic entrance thing. Now, this was about something quieter, something stronger. He brought them to our home, an elegant 3-bedroom apartment overlooking the Palm, with floor-to-ceiling windows and Moroccan tile work. My mother's eyes moved across the space like she was trying to reconcile what she was seeing with the version of me she'd held onto for years. My father said nothing, but I saw the way he stood still just a moment too long. That night, I stood on stage in a tailored white suit, hair pulled back, spotlight on my face. And I told my story, not about the family tension or the skepticism, but about resilience, rejection, and the fire it takes to build something from nothing. I spoke for every person who had ever been underestimated, who dared to believe in themselves when no one else did. When I looked down at the front row, my mother's eyes glistened with tears. My father clapped, a beat longer than everyone else, and in that moment I knew. I didn't need their approval. But damn, it felt good to have their attention. If this story resonated with you, even just a little, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever felt like the outsider in your own family? Have you ever made a choice that no one understood until they finally did? Whether you've already had your helicopter moment or you're still working toward it, your journey matters. And I want to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city, your country, or even a little bit of your story in the comments. Let's turn this comment section into a map of dreamers, builders, and quiet rebels from every corner of the world. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and tap that notification bell. Tomorrow's episode is something special. Another true story of transformation, heartbreak, and unexpected triumph that might just leave you speechless. Same time, same place. Your voice, your presence here. It means more than you know. So, let's keep the conversation going. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what your moment looks like, because your story deserves to be seen too.